Hi Year 11. So this video is to give you some feedback on your most recent mock exam. I've gone through the questions that I think require the most feedback, the ones that people got the most wrong or got the lowest marks for. So it's not every single question, but it's most of them. In order to kind of complete the feedback, you'll need to give yourself about an hour. You need your exam paper, you need a green pen, and you'll need some spare lined paper as well. The video goes quite quick, so the joy of it being a video is that you can pause it and rewind and replay sections as much as you need to. Okay, good luck.
Okay, the first question that we're going to look at is question 2, which is asking us to describe the distribution of hot deserts. And we use figure 1, which is this figure here, to answer that question. So we should be picking up full marks in these questions because we are given the resource, we're given the map, so we should be able to read the distribution off here. The distribution is how something is spread out. And in this case, how hot deserts are spread out around the world. Where are they found? In a distribution question, we would look for major patterns. We've got a 2-mark question here, so we need to say 2 things. In a distribution question, we would use things like continents and lines of latitude, so the Tropic of Cancer, the Equator, and the Tropic of Capricorn, and we would use compass directions as well. So now let's look at an answer that would have got 2 marks. Let's get my red pen. So we've started with an overall kind of summary of the pattern. Most of the world's hot deserts lie between 15 and 35 degrees north and south of the equator. That is worth 1 mark. We know that because when we look back at the map, we can see the equator, which is 0 degrees, the tropics, which are at 23.5 degrees north and south, and then we can see that hot deserts extend over sort of north of and south of those tropics as well. I've picked up the 2nd mark here by deciding to talk about the largest deserts. So in a distribution question, an option is to talk about the overall pattern and then to choose an example, usually the largest of the thing that you are describing. In this sense, the largest desert, the Sahara, stretches across northern Africa. And I pick up my 2nd mark for that. It's worth noting just before we move on that there are several multiple choice questions in this exam, and they will be coming up in the real exam. The mark scheme is really, really clear on what they accept, and they will only accept where students have coloured in, have shaded in the circle in the right box. If you tick, or if you cross, or if you shade the whole thing, you will not pick up the marks. So make sure that you just shade in the right circle. The next question to look at was about rainforests. And you were given the image on the left-hand side. And the question is, describe and explain the features of the vegetation shown in figure 2. Now, figure 2 is absolutely vital here because the question is asking directly about the vegetation in this picture. Several students failed to pick up any marks here because they saw this question as a way to write everything they knew about rainforests rather than looking specifically at the information provided in the picture. It's really important if you're directed to use a picture or a source of another type, you must use it because otherwise you will not pick up the marks. Now, if we have a look at this picture, have a look carefully at the features of the vegetation that you can see. So we've got things like very straight trunks. We have got things like waxy leaves. You can see here the buttress roots. you've also got the lianas climbing up the straight tree trunks so that they too can get to the top for sunlight. I have not mentioned anything so far that's not in the picture. So if in your answer you haven't got any marks, but you've written a big answer about rainforests, it's because you have not used the image to collect your information. Let's have a look at a model answer of this question. Just take a minute with this answer in front of you, just pause the video to compare it with your answer and look for any points that you've written in your original answer that weren't relating to the figure, to figure 2. Add extra points from this answer in green for some revision. Okay, so moving through, this was the next question. And this one was really interesting because a lot of students misread this figure and got it wrong. So if we look down at the question is, which region of the world had the greatest rate of deforestation between 2005 and 2009? Okay, so which region had the greatest rate of deforestation? Now, if we have a look at the source here, we've got average rate is the grey bars, and you've got percentage change on the left. So these are positive percentage changes and these are negative. Okay, so if this is, according to the title, forested regions of the world and how they've changed, these bars represent where more trees have grown, and these bars represent where trees have been cut down, because there is a negative change. So we have less trees. So when we look at our question, which region had the greatest rate of deforestation? Well, which one of the bars that are negative is the largest? It's Central America. You then need this for the next question, and students who got this question wrong also then got this question wrong. So we need to state the number of regions in the world where the rate of deforestation was greater than the world average rate of deforestation between 2005 and 2009. So the number of regions of the world where the rate of deforestation was greater than the world average. Right, let's have a look back at the source. So we've already said that anything above this line, that's positive. Positive change, so more trees are being planted. Okay, this is where there are less trees, so these are deforestation. Now the world average is here, so I'm going to count how many regions have a deforestation rate greater than this one. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not that one, 6. So my answer here is 6. Okay, so the final question that we're going to look at in this section is the 9 marker. Now, these questions carry such a lot of marks. It is absolutely vital that we are getting as many marks in these questions as possible. So the question here says, for a hot desert environment or cold environment you have studied, to what extent does that environment provide both opportunities and challenges for development? So both opportunities and challenges. Now we're going to go onto a separate piece of paper to look at this question. I've split it up like this to help us with our 9-mark answer technique. In a question like this, you are going to be asked to evaluate something. So it could be a to what extent question, or it could ask you a question where there are 2 sides, which is like this one. There are both opportunities and challenges. So we need to go through both sides. We need to argue both sides in order to fully answer the question. Now, best practice is to have 5 explained points across your answer and to use examples from your lessons where you can. So if we have a look at this question, sorry about the wobbling about, dodgy filming. If we have a look at on the one hand first, the cold environment that you studied in class was Alaska. One of the opportunities provided for development there is the fact that it can be visited by tourists. We might write something like this. Alaska welcomes 1 to 2 million tourists annually. You could then develop your point, you could explain your point by explaining that the revenue, the profit from tourism can help to develop local services and facilities. If we have a look at another idea, TNCs. Lots of you remembered this one. Maybe it's because it's about Facebook, but it's a really good one to use. So large TNCs, like Facebook, might base in cold environments because of cheaper land, hydroelectric power, and reliable cooling for their systems, for their computer systems. We need to link that back to the question now. Why then does this provide opportunities for development? So we could develop the point about TNCs by saying something like it creates jobs, or that it develops infrastructure. It might be that the TNC actually wants a particular type of transport. They might develop roads, they might develop a local airport, and all of that will go to help develop the area as a whole. So what about, on the other hand, cold environments provide challenges for development? Okay, so one of the challenges, and this one is a really good one to remember because I think it encompasses lots of points within it, is about permafrost. So 25% of exposed land in the Northern Hemisphere is permafrost. Now, if it melts or starts to thaw, it makes the land unstable. This can be a challenge to development. I hasten to add, this is not a sentence. This is more a sort of a quick list. It's a challenge for development because it affects building, it affects infrastructure. Think about things like road and railway networks kind of sinking or coming out of sync because of the frozen and then the thawing ground. And we can actually create another point there, adding another key word. The thawing of permafrost creates thermocast. So we could use that key word as well as these points here. We could also talk about the climate, and I think this is a really kind of easy one to remember. You know, the clue's in the name, cold environments. So talking about the cold climate, perhaps making it difficult to work in, which may deter new businesses from starting up or disrupt current ones, which would go on to affect the local economy. And that would be a challenge for development in a cold environment like Alaska. So we've moved on and we're now in the coasts section. And we're just going to look really quickly at this one marker because this should have been answered correctly by every single person, and it wasn't. So we need to read the question really carefully. The picture that actually has these cliffs in it is this one here. Mine's black and white. Yours is in colour in your exam, so you'll be able to see that better than me. But we can see from here that we've got a kind of raggedy cliff edge. We can see some material has been kind of worn away. We can see some things are falling into the sea there. We can see that this cliff has been eroded. So the question asks us to name one process of erosion that may affect these cliffs. Now, sorry for the zooming in and out there. People got this wrong because they answered with a transportation method, largely. Okay. Remember that the 4 types of erosion that we have talked about in terms of affecting coasts are hydraulic power or hydraulic action, attrition, abrasion, and solution. So any of those would have been acceptable in this answer. Okay. Because we can see the waves here, there's the white of the waves actually hitting against the cliff. A really good bet would be that hydraulic action is taking place here, or hydraulic power. So that should be our answer. So So another coast question here. This is question 6, and I'm going to use a colour version of this because we really need to be able to see the picture to answer the question. Again, it's another one where you have to use the image, just like the rainforest question with the rainforest picture. You have to use the image here to answer the question. So the question is, suggest how the sea defences shown in figure 6 help protect the coastline. Now it's worth 4 marks. So we need to pick out 2 sea defences, identify them, and then suggest how they protect the coastline. Now, the picture maybe isn't that great on the screen right now, but hopefully you can see in yours that we've got a curved sea wall. And then we've got these really big rocks at the front, which are rock armour, or riprap, as they are also known. Now we need to think about what these sea defences do. Okay, so the curved sea wall is going to kind of rebound the energy from the sea. Okay, so as the sea comes up, when the tide comes in and the sea comes up and the waves hit against the wall will reflect the wave energy back to the sea. And how does that help protect the coastline? Remember, this is the focus of the question. Well, just behind the wall, you can see that there are houses. So the reflective wave energy is important because it's going to protect the land and the buildings behind. Okay, now let's have a look at the rock armour here. So the rock armour are the large boulders piled up on the beach. Now, they will, again, absorb energy. So the curved sea wall is actually reflecting the energy, and the rock armour is going to absorb wave energy. And that's going to allow material to be deposited. So it's going to allow the beach to build up. It's going to stop the waves taking everything away from the beach and from this part of the coastline. A really important bit of feedback on this question that I noted down when I was marking was that not every student was saying how the defence protects the coastline. So really do look back at your question, and when you're writing your answer, try and stop halfway through and go back and check what is the focus of the question. And here we need to see the coastline has different features. It has got buildings, but this coastline also has a beach here, which is why we've talked about that in our 2 points here. So check your answer now and add points that relate specifically to the focus. How does the defences, how do they protect the coastline? Okay, so the next question I wanted to look at was question 7. Now, question 7, unfortunately, was one that quite a lot of students missed out, which was frustrating because we had very recently talked about depositional landforms in our lessons. This is the kind of question that we're going to need some resilience for, and we're really going to need to think hard about what we know and really push ourselves to write the answer. The question says, using figure 7 and your own knowledge, explain how different landforms may be created by the transport and deposition of sediment along the coast. So this question is a landform formation question, and you are being asked how different coastal landforms are created by transport, the movement of sediment, and deposition, the placing down of sediment on the coast. Now, the first thing I would recommend you do, if you look at the figure here, look for and try and identify some of the different depositional landforms you can see. Okay, so we've got a spit here. We can see a beach. And I also can see here, this is a bar. It's essentially a spit that's grown across a bay. And we've got another spit here. Okay. So what this question rather is looking for is for you to explain how these different things are formed. And it must start with a description, or an explanation really, of how longshore drift works, because longshore drift is the process that transports sediment along the coastline. And on this map, we've even got the direction of the prevailing wind to remind us that longshore drift is part of this process. So have a look at this answer. So all we've done here is explained the process of longshore drift first. I've done that here. It's absolutely key to this question, so it is worth explaining it in detail. And you can see I've used keywords like prevailing wind, swash, and backwash. I've then gone on to show how longshore drift and deposition form a spit, a bar, and a beach. Now, why have I used those three? Well, if we look back to the source, remember we labelled them before because it shows us those three things. That's why this question is a really great question. It's an opportunity for us because it does actually give us a lot that we then can use in our answer. A couple more things. I've used an extra key word here. I've said that material is transported in suspension, and that will pick me up some extra credit. So where you can, use specific processes, whether it's a type of transportation or in another question, a type of erosion. Check your answer now. See what you need to add from this model answer. And it's worth, if you haven't done so already, making flashcards for each of those depositional landforms and how they're formed. Okay, so we're nearly there. Well done for hanging in there. There's just a couple more questions that I wanted to go through. And this one is a really simple one. It's just worth 1 mark. But again, it's one of those questions where if we just guess, then we're losing an opportunity to get a really valuable mark. So this question says, using figure 10, which is this one here, measure the direct distance between the Cambridge Science Park and junction 14 of the M11. Okay, so how do we know which map it is first of all? Well, if I look at this map here, it doesn't tell me where any of the junctions are. And I can't see where the Cambridge Science Park is as well. So I know that it's not this map that I need to use. I know it's this one. I'll use the red so it's a bit more obvious. So the Cambridge Science Park is here, nicely labelled for me. And the M11 is here and junction 14 is there. Now, how am I going to know the distance? Well, I'm going to use the scale on the map. So I'm going to get my ruler. It says direct distance. So I need to measure directly from junction 14 to the Cambridge Science Park. Now on my ruler, that's 3 centimetres. I then take my ruler down to the scale so I can see, well, what does that mean? So according to this scale, 1.5 centimetres is 2 kilometres. So that means that 3 centimetres is 4 kilometres. So what is the direct distance? 4 kilometres. Now, in the mark scheme, the correct answer is 4.6 kilometres. Now, that would be very challenging to go really far in, and that's kind of, is that in the middle, and is that in the middle, and then take it down and be working out percentages and kind of, you know, points like that, not percentages, sorry, points. In the mark scheme, they allow a mark for anywhere between 4 and 5 kilometres. So that's really good because it does give you a little bit of flexibility. It means that the examiners can still check that you're doing it accurately, but it just might mean that some students are doing it in a slightly different angled line, or they've added on a couple of millimeters either side, or something like that. But don't guess. Don't guess. You must measure, you must use a ruler. If you didn't have a ruler with you in your mock exam, it's definitely something to think about for your next set of exams. Really important to have the right equipment with you. Okay, so you've nearly made it. All my dodgy, shaky filming. This is the last question in this exam that we're going to go through, and it's another 9 marker. So really, really important that we are getting the marks in these questions. They can have a massive impact on your overall grade. Now, this question is a statement, and they're asking if we agree. So the statement is, transnational corporations, TNCs, only bring advantages to the host country. Do you agree with this statement? Yes or no? And we're being asked to justify our decision. So let's look at this final question, and let's do it like we did before on a separate bit of paper. Now we're going to use exactly the same structure. It's a 9-mark evaluative question. So we have to be arguing one side first and then the other side. We should, as we said before, best practice is 5 different points throughout your answer, and using case studies and examples from the classroom. If you want to get top marks, in fact, if you want to get into level 3, you have to use those examples, as many as you can remember, to back up your points. So the statement is TNCs only bring advantages to the host country. Let's look at the agree section first. So we're saying, yes, I agree, they bring advantages. They create jobs. This is going to pay better than other local jobs. This could create a rise in the standard of living for people who have those jobs. There's also local investment by TNCs. So you learnt in your lesson about Shell, who run a literacy project in Nigeria with the communities that they work within. That's going to increase the literacy rate in Nigeria. However, we disagree as well. So we're saying, on the other hand, I disagree. And we disagree because we know that TNCs don't only bring advantages, we know that they bring disadvantages, such as money is taken out of the host country. In that way, it can't then be spent on local services and improving those local services such as education and health. We know from our lessons that workers are exploited. They may have to work in unsafe or unhygienic conditions. They might work in sweatshops, and they might work very long hours. There's also environmental damage. So again, thinking about Nigeria and the oil industry there, which is so important to their economy, oil leaks or spills can have a really serious impact in terms of polluting the natural environment, which can lead to species being affected and habitats destroyed.